Good evening. We'll call to order the regular monthly meeting of the City of Helotes Planning and Zoning Commission. It's July 10th, 7:03 PM. Ask for our secretary to please call the roll when he's ready.
Joe Edmond,
Yeah.
Ron Haza, Greg Michelle.
Here.
Mike McLaughlin. Richard Hawk. Here. Jeff Wade.
Here.
And we are, Mario and Jason are
Jason
absent.
Whiteman, Mario Rios.
Mario Rios are absent.
And we have Andrea, what's your last name again?
Andrea Goff.
Goff is here, Andrea Goff from staff, Susan Darst, Alex Blue, Ernest Cruz. We're almost outnumbered, guys. But thank you all for being here. We're going to move ahead with our agenda this evening. I don't believe we have any citizens signed up to be heard. So we will push ahead. With the indulgence of my commission, I'm going to reorder this the agenda this evening to put some of the old business items at the end, just for expediency's sake. So I'd like to start with item number 6, which is the minutes for this, from the June 5th meeting, which you should have had a chance to find in your packet and have a chance to review. And if you have corrections, changes, or an edit of any type, please call that to our attention.
What time did you start?
7:03.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as printed.
It is the motion from Jeff, Richard second. Any discussion, any changes? I gather not. So the motion is to approve the minutes from June 5th as submitted. All in favor, please signal aye.
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 Opposed? The minutes from June 5th are approved.
That was Jeff and
Jeff and Richard. Okay, thank you. I'd like to turn back now to item number 5 on your agenda for this evening. Item 5 is discussion and action on a request by Keller Custom Signs for approval of a single business use monument sign pursuant to the Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 68, Section 49, that's commercial signs, single business use for T&D Morvitas Concrete Contractors at 10511 Shanefield Road. You should have the material in your packet that speaks to this item. If we need some input from staff, Susan, are you the best one to do it? Okay, not sure that we do, and one of you fellows must be, if we have questions. So I open it up for discussion and any questions that folks may have. And this is, by the way, an approval item, not a recommendation.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple questions here.
Yes.
It's kind of a unique site, one of the first ones that we've seen, implementing solar panels to, I assume, power the interior lighting. Correct. Yeah.
Can I ask you to just come up for, we record all this, say your name and your business address.
I'm
please.
Brian Leonard, T&D Moravitz, and the address is 10511 Shanefield Road.
Thanks. Go ahead, Jeff.
So those solar panels are being used to power the internal lighting,
Internal lighting of the sign, yes, sir.
whether power is available out there?
Only for probably up to 4 hours per evening. So the intent's really morning hours. We are a concrete contractor, and so we'll power it from probably 1 to 2 hours in the evening, and then beginning at 3 a.m. until daylight.
So it'll be on some sort of timer or something
Yes.
to
Yes, it'll have a
turn
timer
off at
controller.
those hours? As part of our ordinance, there is a ordinance that we have to have at least 18 inches of masonry base at the bottom. It looks like there's only just a couple.
So it's going to sit on an 18-inch concrete pad with 6 inches exposed above grade. We could pick that up. But the intention is to provide that aluminum base so that we have access for the batteries, the controllers, and the wiring harnesses that feed up to the lighting and the sign.
I think Rick did have a concern on that part. He wanted to just make sure that it was masonry on that bottom part and not the aluminum.
So the aluminum, you said was sort of the housing for the
Right,
solar?
so that we have access to it.
Right.
So the lights will basically have cables that drop below it with the panels mounted outside on the aluminum
Right.
base, but then the batteries would be below it.
Got it. So to make it compliant with code, we would ask that the actual masonry part of that base be at 18 inches.
Okay.
Before the aluminum housing starts.
So we could still keep the aluminum base and pick up a 18-inch concrete pad, and you're saying masonry could be concrete or it needs to be stone?
Well, it could, I mean, I think either way, right?
Either way, it's rock, some form of rock, concrete, rock, whatever is
Okay.
masonry for us.
Okay.
But doing that, would that take it up to excessive height or anything?
It was at, so that base is 6 inches right now?
It's 6 inches above grade. It actually will be an 18-inch base, but it was 12 inches below ground and then 6 inches exposed.
I think the height was the height not okay?
Right, but if they're raising it up another foot,
It was 5 feet,
7,
5 3/4, somebody do the math.
or were we at 8 feet?
Yep.
Yeah, so we could, the base will need to be sized the way it is, the aluminum base, but we could reduce the height of the sign to comply with 8-foot
Total height.
maximum.
Yeah, I mean, the goal will be to keep the whole thing top to bottom at 8.
Within 8 feet, yes, sir.
And understand the housing has to be what the housing needs to be for the functioning of that
Okay.
solar light. Other questions? I had one, Andrea, can you go to the photograph? Photograph, I was having trouble citing the sign on the actual photograph. Maybe you could just point out the location for us. Yeah. So where will the,
So this is, the reason for the sign is we're set back 500 feet from Shanefield Road, so people have a hard time finding our
Right.
address. And so,
just walk on over there, the
Okay.
easiest.
so the sign is about 40-foot offset behind the street, and it will be between this power pole and the existing fence.
Okay. Anybody have any questions or?
Is there any other signs there now? On any of the property, any of the
Not on our
businesses?
site or the adjacent property. There's a Dollar General down the street from us that has a sign, two lots over, but it's actually within the city of San Antonio.
Okay, yeah, it's an interesting place.
Right.
so since it's behind that telephone pole, you aren't gonna need to put up any type of concrete barrier for trucks?
Right. So we originally looked at having it in front of it, but fear of the sign being damaged, we decided to push it back as far as possible from the street.
Well, and that lighting will help it too, with that location. Because you were indicating you probably have a lot of early morning traffic
Right,
as opposed to other times. so,
right.
Okay. Any other questions?
Is there any concern, isn't that an easement right there?
Say that again?
Wouldn't that be an easement along that pole line? Is there any concern about being too close to the pole or anything, or do you need to get approval from CP&L, or?
Either one, anybody on staff can maybe speak to that?
City public, if it's a utility easement, like city public service, I think there is a distance that you need to maintain from them. And I think you might be able to get a variance from them as well if they have, I don't know if it's 5 or 10 feet, but you may want to get with them on that.
But that's their process?
Yes, yes, sir.
That's not city, so that's CPS.
Okay, we'll check into that.
Make sure before you do anything.
Right.
Okay.
We're set back from the easement, but I don't know if there is like an easement that feeds back towards
I don't think,
the building.
Yeah, I'm looking.
I think there was. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
We can have a motion at this point in time, and the salient issues to include in it would be the 18-inch base and ensuring the 8-foot total height, just to confirm that it conforms. So who would like to make a motion?
What's the overall height? 8 feet? 8 feet overall
On the
height?
total height, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion.
Go ahead, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the request by Keller Custom Signs for approval of a single business use monument sign pursuant to Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 66, Signs, Section 6649, for T&D Moravitas Concrete Contractors located at 10511 Shanefield Road, provided that the base be increased from the current 6 inches to 18 inches of masonry and keeping the overall height to less than 8 feet.
Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second.
Richard. Discussion, Jeff or Richard?
No?
Or
No.
anyone else? Okay, so the motion is to approve the request from Keller Custom Signs for the single business use monument sign pursuant to code 6649, commercial signs, single business use. T&D Moravitas Concrete Contractors, 10511 Shanefield Road, on the condition that the base be raised to 18 inches of masonry and that the total height be limited to 8 feet. All in favor of the motion signal aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. So that item is approved. Thank you, sir. Let's turn to item 7 tonight, which is discussion and action on the request by SK&A Architecture for approval of a conceptual design plan pursuant to code 9872, that's zoning Old Town Helotes Special District, for the Holtz Retail Shell and School Buildings 14789 Old Bandera Road, including but not limited to site plan, building design, and exterior lighting. I gather you're here to represent if we have any questions. So, this is item 7, and Andrew, you might just fast forward to that one, to the drawings. Susan, did you want to say anything about this in terms of the recommendation?
Just to highlight the background, which, just very quickly, this, on February 6th, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of a conceptual design plan, site plan, building plan, lighting for the original Holtz Retail Shell Building, contingent upon a 60% impervious cover limitation. City Council then approved that recommendation on February 8th. This is the second submission submitted on June 19th that includes a revision of, in addition of a 2,000 square foot building with the orientation modification. So we're revisiting those plans with the addition of.
Okay, so maybe come on up, because I'm sure we'll have some questions. Just tell us your name and business address.
Sure, my name is Fernando Garcia with SK&A Architects, 13438 Bandera Road, here in Helotes. And the reason we're coming, again, is from our previous, we had already submitted this once for approval back when it burnt down. As part of that hearing, we had to reduce our impervious cover to 60%. So to do that, we had to return the building a little bit. We had to reorient the building. And since we were already changing things up, the owner requested if we could add a second building. I think he's gonna try to lease to the school that's right next door. So part of this is resubmitting, showing the revision to the impervious cover, and then also showing that second building, kind of in the back corner off.
You say the school right next door, you are talking about, was
There's a
Marvelously made.
Marvelously made. I think they were gonna lease this as some office space, and they wanted a smaller building, kind of in the corner there.
and so obviously it's still at 60% or less on
Yes, sir.
impervious now.
Yes, sir.
Do you happen to know what it is?
No, I think we're right at 60% with the two buildings and the asphalt, with the two buildings and the asphalt, that we've taken everything, and we've reduced it down quite a bit to get it down to 60%. And so the overall appearance of the building is gonna match the one that was already previously
that's what I'm
approved, so we're just basically recreating that same image. Like I said, we're just with the formal process of resubmitting.
So it's the same color scheme and the same
Same
design?
everything. Well, one thing we did change from, we actually had submitted the original shell for building permit, and one of the comments was made that the light fixtures that we had originally selected needed to be adjusted, so we're submitting those again as full cutoff lights. That's the third page, or the last page.
Are those different? So those are different from
Those
what-
are a little different. I think the ones we had before were not 100% cut off, and these are 100% cut off.
And that'll go for both buildings?
That'll go for both buildings as well, sir, yes.
Okay. Others with questions or comments?
Chair?
Yes.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
It looks like the previous plan was in the back here, included a lot more parking spaces. So we're decreasing asphalt, decreasing parking spaces, increasing a building. Are we within,
Yes, sir. For our calculations, we are. I think we only needed like 10 spaces total, once you figure what the requirements were, and then having to meet the 60% reduced coverage, we were within the spaces that are allowed per code.
for both
For the-
buildings?
Yes, for both buildings. Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, we can't add any more spaces, without losing the second building.
Remind us what the intended use of the first building
The
is.
first building is just retail. It's a shell building for retail where it's empty shell for now, and then as tenants come in, they'll come in for whatever, small business. Several small businesses. So I think we have it planned for at least 5 20-bay spaces.
5, you said?
5 20 bays, so it's divided into 5 sections, 20 feet each for tenants. And if you look at the front elevation, it kind of shows the proposed doors.
Yeah.
And nothing on that is changing, it's just,
No, all we're doing is twisting
Rotating
it.
it?
We had to rotate it to get the coverage, to reduce the impervious cover, and we're adjusting the light fixtures.
So is the front now, is it actually facing Old Bandera at the front?
It always was. It was just a little bit, originally, if you look at the site plan, we were trying, the original design was to try to orient it the same direction as it
Yeah.
was before. We were trying to keep it, we were gonna keep it here. We were gonna keep it facing this direction, but then once we had to readjust all the impervious cover, all we did was spin it on its end. So we're still trying to save the original, there's a planter with a bunch of trees, we're still trying to save all that. So nothing's really changed on that building other than we're just kind of twisting it to get it to fit. So it'll actually face Old Bandera a little more square.
Yeah. Can't hurt. And we haven't seen signage yet, have we?
Right now, there is no proposed signage for the site. I mean, the tenants obviously will have to get their own permits, they'll have to get their own signage. It's just a shelf space. So,
Okay.
Could you talk about your lighting again?
yes, sir, so what we did is, when the original submittal, we have some building light, we don't have any site lighting, everything comes off the building. And I think part of the ordinances is all those have to be 100% cut off. And the original package we submitted, I think one of the comments was to verify that the light fixtures were indeed 100% cut off. And I think we had one fixture that wasn't, and so we went ahead and changed it to be 100% cut off, so we don't have any overlight.
Mr. Chairman. Now, the elevation, the right side, is that facing south?
The right side.
Or is that?
Yeah, that'll be facing south. The front elevation will be facing west toward the school. One of the things that we're proposing, we're gonna do is probably put a gate in the fence between the school so they have access to it from that direction as well. So the orientation is gonna be, so from the side, it'll be so what you would see from Bandera would actually be the left elevation,
Okay,
is what you would see from Bandera Road.
okay.
And again, it's-
And that's the one you have the wainscoting on, the rock?
Yeah, we have, yes, sir, the wainscoting, it will face Bandera and it'll face the west side.
Okay. Now, so the rear of the building is then facing the
East
the
side,
development with the restaurants in it?
yes, sir.
I'm just looking how visible that's gonna be from Bandera Road. I guess not. All right, I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, I think as you're coming down Bandera, the big building will block that view, and then once you get past, you won't be able to see it.
But just to go back to signs for a second, you're not expecting there to be any sort of monument sign for the entire?
Not at the moment, no. I mean, we're not asking for one now, so.
Make sure they know that they need to come back.
Yes, yeah, I mean, we understand that the signage approval is a whole
Right.
separate approval. and that's why we didn't want to include it in this, so there is no signage planned. What you see on the elevation is what will be there day one, and as tenants move in, they'll have to get their own finish out permit, and they'll have to get their own sign permit.
Okay. I think we're good unless there are other questions or comments. We can have a motion.
Mr. Chair, I was just curious about,
Yes.
as far as the school using that, as far as the picture on the right, where's the school located at? In
The school, I don't know if you can, or if you have.
I don't, no, it
So the school
stops.
is actually here.
Right
It
here.
actually takes up from this corner to here, and so we were gonna put a gate. That's why the building is oriented to face this way. So we're gonna put a gate here for the access to the building.
Okay.
Again, that was just part of negotiations, trying to get everything figured out the best way.
So for the benefit of others, can you just point on the screen there where that is?
So if you, I don't know if you can pan this over a little bit.
I don't think, I think it's called.
Scroll over on the bottom?
Over here.
Yeah.
No, it does. There you go.
A little more further.
You know, the corner of Antonio
Down
and
or up?
Bandera.
There we go.
Right, so the school is actually from the Bandera Road back all the way to the other property line. That is actually the school. And so we were gonna provide a gate that connects the two properties so they can go back and forth.
You have a fence around this, right?
Yeah, there's a fence there, yes.
What is this fence made of?
Right now, it's just an existing chain link fence.
It's chain link?
Yeah, that's existing right now. We're just gonna
Instead
put a
of a
fence.
silver chain link fence?
What's that, sir?
Instead of a silver color?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is there other fencing next door to you? Seems to
Excuse me?
that- Is there some other fencing next to you, next to your building?
It's actually chain link. There's chain link all the way around that's existing.
Out there, one existing chain link?
Yes, sir. That's
I thought there
all.
was an iron fence there.
No, sir. There, if you go, I'm not sure if there's anything, there may be some decorative fencing closer to
Yeah.
that Cheetah retail, I don't know, something's here. But once you get around the side, it's all chain link fence. It's existing, it's there now, we're not taking it down. And actually, I think it goes all the way on 3 sides, we're not taking it down.
Yep. Okay. A motion. Thanks.
No, thank you.
I'll propose a motion.
Go ahead, Joe.
I propose that the request by SK&A Architectural for approval of the conceptual design plan pursuant to municipal code and ordinance chapter 98 zoning, section 9872, Old Town and Lotus Special District for the Hulse Retail, Shell, and School Building located at 14789 Old Bandera Road, Lotus, Texas, more particularly described as BCAD property ID number 242066, including but not limited to the site plan, the building design, and the exterior lighting, be approved.
I'll second it.
Okay. Joe or Ron, any discussion? Anyone else?
me.
Yes, Joe. is that good?
No, that's fine with me.
I'm good.
Anybody else? Nope. So the motion is to approve the request from SK&A Architecture of the conceptual design plan pursuant to code chapter 9872, Old Town Helotes Special District for the Holtz Retail, Shell, and School Buildings at 14789 Old Bandera Road, including but not limited to site plan, building design, and exterior lighting. All in favor of the motion, signal aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you. Okay, our last item tonight is to circle back to item 4, which is discussion and action on an ordinance amending the City of Helotes Code of Ordinances, chapters 34 for environment, 66 for signs, and 98 for zoning, providing for council review and action on commercial developments and single-family residential subdivision developments, exterior lighting, signage, and conceptual designs. I'm not going to read the whole thing at this point. I think you all know the rest of it, can see it there. We started this discussion, as you know, last month, but we were similarly shorthanded, different mix of people. We were missing our liaison, so it was an opportunity to give people more time to review this item and for us to gather some input. one of our absent members has sent a write-up, an email with his assessment and his comments for our consideration. Susan, I would start by asking, there's nothing new from staff's perspective about this. This a public hearing was held by council last month as well. Okay, so I think at this point, Alex, it might be helpful if you could just take a minute to give maybe the council perspective on this, knowing that you're speaking for the group as opposed to what any one person may think.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, when it first came up, it was a little bit of a surprise to me as well. Our mayor put this on the agenda, and originally it came to council for kind of an opinion perspective. At that meeting, we were actually only had 3 of the 5 council members present at that meeting, and really didn't have a lot of background on it. The consensus at that meeting was to go ahead and forward it to planning and zoning for their opinion review, discussion, and recommendation one way or the other. At which time staff then went ahead and wrote up all of the ordinance changes that would be appropriate based on what our mayor had put together. And the wheels were put in motion to do the public hearing both here and at council. Council does require a recommendation one way or the other from P&Z in order to take action on any ordinance change, and that's what this is. And so when planning and zoning didn't make the ordinance, didn't make a recommendation at the last moment, although we had the public hearing, we didn't really do anything because we couldn't take action on it without that recommendation one way or the other. I'm not going to try to interpret either what the mayor's opinion or other members of council. Obviously, there were only 3 at the council meeting where it was first looked at and brought in this direction. We didn't have a lot of discussion at the last one. It was just a public hearing. No one spoke, and we went on. So the 2 other council members really didn't have a lot to say on it because it wasn't a discussion item without being able to do anything with it. Some of the concerns that were voiced, and I'll say it this way, not trying to either support, defend, or oppose the comments that were made. One, there was some concern that things are developing in Helotes, and many of the council members didn't feel they were completely up on what was going on. Felt some of the council members did not believe they were completely current on all of the development situation that was going on in the city. In particular, one member indicated that they were to be asked questions by a citizen and didn't know it was even on the agenda for P&Z. I'm not going to say about whether or not where the responsibility lies on that. I did give our city administrator recommendations with regard to communication, which he took well. I know that your chairman provides a complete report on every meeting. I can tell you from firsthand experience, I rarely see them. They're not forwarded to us generally. That was my recommendation to our city administrator. I also can say that in my opinion, sometimes the concern about not knowing what is going on doesn't necessarily mean that you do and we don't. It's just that it doesn't actually float up there. Staff may know about what's coming, but until it comes for an action or a decision, it doesn't either come here or to council. And so sometimes things are being developed and going on and approved at a staff level where you guys don't even know about it either, right? Not to mention there are times when things get built and nobody even came to staff for it. We've experienced a lot of that. So from an information perspective, that's the case. And we are in the process of going through the sign ordinance. The mayor tried to bring that to us as one lump sum thing, was unsatisfied as to how it was going because it was such a very large document and there was not a lot of consensus. As a result, he's now bringing things piecemeal to council, and apparently when that gets through hashing it out, then there will be planning and zoning recommendations. Right now, I think we talked about banners and all that, and there's a lot of discussion, a lot of sometimes disagreement on what to do with banners. And so some of this to me is, I don't know whether the order is right, but the process is already well in place. The public hearings have already been held. Your recommendation will be adhered to, and Thursday night, it will come to a vote on council as to the outcome of this. I don't really know how it's going to come out. Not everybody has had an opportunity to voice their opinions, so I don't really know how that's going to turn out. What I can tell you is that there is a lot of weight to the planning and zoning recommendation. What I am not going to say, because I don't believe it, is that there is any feeling of doubt of the planning and zoning's recommendation, thought process, et cetera. That is not what's driving this. I think it's more a matter of, and I know our mayor in his introduction of this originally said, there's going to be a great deal of development coming to Helotes now, especially with this ETJ addition and along our major corridors that will involve a lot of development that will need to come. And in his opinion, and again, this is coming from our mayor, the elected officials need to have a say on what is or isn't permitted within the city. Not that your recommendation isn't extremely valuable, because it really is. I mean, I obviously am here all the time. I was on this body for 10 years, and I concur, not unanimously, but by and large, the way this body comes to its conclusion. I don't necessarily believe that there were any specific recommendations in the past that triggered this. I don't believe that to be the case, though I'm not so sure if that is somebody's opinion or not, but I don't think there was anything specific. I think it's the concern about knowing what's going on and having a say by the elected officials on what's going on. I will also add that our city attorney was at the last council meeting and did state that in his knowledge, there is no other city in this area, not just Bexar County, that grants P&Z or their Architectural Review Board or Commission, which we don't have, but many cities do, blanket approval authority on this sort of thing. And that probably carries some weight with some to say, well, why are we the outlier with regard to that? I mentioned to our city attorney, I find it hard to believe that the City Council of San Antonio approves every sign. His response is they rarely approve really any signs, because they have such a very vague sign ordinance that almost anything it just flows right through staff. But that's it. So that's kind of some of where we are. I don't think it was ever intended to be a doubt of the planning and zoning's capacity or ability, but a feeling that that the official decision-making should rest with an elected body as opposed to an appointed one. That's really the gist of it. Now, certainly you want to make your recommendation as you go, and it will be certainly taken into consideration. And I would also add, just as my point, that to me, and this is just my opinion, your recommendation doesn't have to necessarily be up and down on the entire ordinance. And as many times you guys make valid split decisions on, well, we like this part, we think maybe this part needs to be, or we're fine with that, but do this differently, and that's certainly valuable and will be weighed accordingly. I think that's probably a good thing. Well, I'm not going to steer you in what I
So
think.
let me, does anybody have any questions for Alex? To be clear, the process goes forward to council this week. We will make a recommendation. Whatever the recommendation is, then council will act. They don't necessarily have to approve or disapprove the commission's recommendation, but they can act
Right.
on the item itself. I think the one thing, we talked about last time, you weren't here, Alex, I think everybody agrees it's a good thing for council to have oversight of things in general. I mean, that's just it's common sense in a lot of ways. But there was concern about whether this really serves the city and the citizens, not to mention the council, to have it having final authority on so many things that are very detailed and quite numerous. We have a lot of signs every month, and we see a number of things that seem to be there'd be better ways for council to use its time, I guess would be the way to put it. And one of the things that I thought of, and I'd be interested to hear what others think, it really, similar to what you suggested there at the end, which is, if you think about what's in this proposed amendment, it talks about signage, exterior lighting, and, what's the other one? Design plans, right? That's clearly, that last one there is clearly different from the other two in terms of its importance and significance. Think about some of the larger design site plans we've seen come before us. Tonight's one example, though it's in Old Town, so maybe unique, but that would seem to me to be a perfectly appropriate thing for council to have some, not just awareness of, but authority over, given how large an impact it could have on the broader community. Compared to signs and lighting, not to say that those aren't important, but this group has always done a pretty good job, been very diligent about enforcing the code. And when there's any discrepancies or unusual requests, they do end up at council anyway with variances. So my thought, as I've considered this over the past month, is that it would seem that lighting and signage would probably ensure a more efficient process for everybody involved to remain with this body, whereas design authority over design plans could be more appropriately passed along to council, given their significance. So I just throw that out there, and it builds on what he had said. But I'm, open to any other thoughts or ideas people have regarding this.
My recommendation at the end was not to say vote in favor of one or not the other, but sometimes when you have mixed feelings on the entire package, if you break it up into pieces, you may end up with I'm okay with this one, but I'm not with that one. But if you put it all together, then I'm forced into making a decision on something that I may have acted on differently one way or the other. And that would allow you to make a recommendation on sections of it that could very well alter the conversation, rather than just say, yeah, okay, great, or we're absolutely opposed. That doesn't really give any opinions so much as just a vote. And breaking it into partial pieces like that would allow you to express more of an opinion on the different categories, as your
Mr.
chairman
Chairman?
indicated.
Joe?
Don't go away. Just from my observation and what I hear, it seems to me we're talking about really communications versus actions, and how we establish a plan to communicate probable actions so that they're communicated where everybody understands what the probable action would be, who's going to take the action, when it's going to be taken.
There were several, communication is a part of it, but communication doesn't necessarily mean knowledge and understanding, okay? So it's one thing, one of the suggestion I made to our city administrator was that to ensure that all actions taken by this body are forwarded, but those are still after the fact communications. Some of the concerns by a council member was that they weren't aware of anything in advance, even though things were already well on their way. And I would say, and I had a long conversation about this with our city administrator. I want to give you, part of me wanted to go in there and say, give us a report weekly on what's happening in the city, right? That would solve the problem, except if he did that, everything's public record. And the problem with that is you have businesses that won't have a discussion with the city if the outcome is public record. It could alter their purchase plans, alter their negotiations with things. And so in some ways, advanced communication of what's coming really could be a detriment to the city and or developers and or people wanting to move into the city. So there's the dilemma. Where do you put that communication? Some were thinking, I don't even know what's going on. And there are some ways you can work towards that, but it doesn't solve it completely. The second aspect of it, is it only communication or is it control? Okay. I brought this up at the last council meeting as well, and I'm not sure it went over very well with some. But You still have to ask that question. Do you believe that the control for the decision-making of this kind of commercial development rests with an elected official or an appointed body? And that's really the gist of what's being discussed here.
But lines of authority, along with communication, should solve what you're talking about. If we can define the lines of authority in conjunction with the communications on it, who knows what, who does what, it seemed to me would solve itself if we could develop that approach.
Authority, exactly, assuming that you mean by if we revise certain things within our ordinances like signs that give staff complete authority to do certain things and not other things, then it could very well eliminate some of what even comes to here, right? Because sometimes you see things and there's no variance required.
Yeah.
Although rarely do they not require some variance when they come here, right? Because otherwise staff approves a lot of things like that without even coming this direction. Lots of signs go up and down and you don't actually have to know about it because they completely comply with our ordinance. And as we go through the ordinance, it may resolve a lot of that issue for us.
And somebody who feel like they should know, don't know, evidently.
I can't speak for those who don't feel they know. I attend the meetings,
If
so I
they-
know.
I'm
but
just only going
that-
by the questions of who's doing what to whom and how and that kind of thing. It seems to me that there must be somebody, maybe an elected official who feels like, I should know this and I don't. I should have this authority and I don't.
There's some feeling about that, yes.
I just go back to communication and lines of authority should certainly help to resolve that.
Well, you can know the authority and not actually resolve whether you feel it's right or not.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a
I can know you have the authority and not like it. So
Well-
knowledge of the authority doesn't resolve whether I feel it's necessary for you to have that authority or not. That's a different topic. In the end, you have to make a recommendation. I recommend that, Mr. Chairman, if you plan to be in the meeting, try to at least convey some of the feeling behind it.
Sure.
As well as just the decision that the commission makes. Because I think that sometimes you get the planning and zoning unanimously disapproved this. Not really knowing why, and assuming that some of the council members don't try to read everything in detail or see the videos, which many times are not even available to be seen prior to the council meetings, even if they avail themselves to it, then they only know that it happened, but they don't understand the why part about it. And that could lead to some, I don't really know, because that wasn't my thought. I'm just relaying what concerns there were. There were, the thought is, again, there's a lot coming down the pike, especially when you consider Bandera Road, what will probably be down the road 1560. I mean, we have to admit that we live in a city where it's growing by leaps and bounds. You saw Honey's House already developed. We had to rezone an area that was residential and converted into commercial. It's a lot of property down that road that's prime commercial property. And, you know, there's going to be more development, and even in areas that right now may not look like it's going to be, but with the advent of the water and sewer line up Highway 16, all of that stuff's coming up forward. I think that's what prompted our mayor to put this on the agenda even to start with, is that he wants to have that full disclosure right up front and make sure that the elected council members are involved in the process making from start to finish. I'll let you go on. Thank you.
Are there other comments, questions?
Mr. Chair, I have a few comments.
Go ahead.
In light of what our councilman just presented to us, you know, the communication issue goes back to, a lot of times we don't even know what's coming up until we get our packets on Friday, 4 days before our meeting. A case in point, item number 7 tonight, the architectural plans for, we didn't have any previous knowledge or anything till 4 days before our meeting, which these minutes, along with the plans, are made public on the website. Second point would be as far as piecemealing or picking out, working on section by section. I feel like we're getting kind of steamrolled or railroaded into this, saying, hey, we're going on this Thursday. Therefore, we need to work on everything that has been presented to us tonight, unless we move it again, back another month. Whenever we make changes to the ordinance, the sign ordinance that we've been working on for 6 to 9 months, it takes a while. And this big of a change, I feel, needs a little bit more time. I do somewhat agree with you on, doing the site plan, giving them some oversight on that. I do also feel that the city council, maybe not this exact city council, but city council is the one that created the city ordinances that we abide by and the rules that are in place for us to give approvals or variances or pass it on to council. So to me, and my point and my feeling is that they have already had their say or do have their say by putting down and laying out those guidelines that we abide by.
It's a fair point. And council has it within its authority, of course, to, lead the process of revising parts of the code that they wish to. Ron, did you want to comment on any of this?
Well, there's several of these things that, like if you go back to, what is it? 66-73. You think that planning and zoning would be be able to review that.
I'm sorry, planning and zoning, commission shall review the appearance, shall review the signs, right?
Reviewed by, but our review has been taken off of there, scratched out.
Where you see that? Well, I think that's just the title or the caption to it. In the very first line?
Yeah.
I could, Susan, I don't know if you can speak to that, but I read that as the title of the section.
Second line says it will, man.
Say that again?
What section?
6673. So Ron was just commenting that the very first words, review by planning, the review was taken out, even though the actual description of
Look like review was just moved.
subject of the paragraph is review.
I think that is the heading. That looks
Okay.
like the heading or the
Yeah,
title of that section.
rearranged.
Actually, it was duplicate before, because if you put the words back in, it said, review by planning and zoning commission review.
It's still got review in there.
It was duplicate,
Okay.
they just removed the first.
Okay. What's been,
Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
Rick did say that this was already approved by the city attorney. So if y'all have anything that y'all would like, changed
Yeah.
or added or struck from it, to just make the changes or tell me and I'll mark the changes
Okay.
for them so that we can send it.
Well, the one, and I don't know if you wanted to keep going, but I was just
Go
gonna
ahead,
add the
go
one thing that, and I would refer staff to Commission Member Mike McLaughlin's remarks, because some of them were non-substantive, but just ensuring the language was right. But the one thing that he did make, I think, a fair point on was, for example, in 6674, letter C, at the top of page 3, and the language is duplicated elsewhere, but his point was that the changing of the language from shall to should suggests a lack of sort of certainty on what the right approach should be, and that shall is in fact the preferred language. So I don't know if folks felt that that was important. I know it's only referencing the time frame in there.
I take shall as being directive.
Correct.
Should being optional. Maybe, maybe not.
So is there I know there's a review, an appeal process, but in other words, if it extends beyond 60 days, what happens? Do we know? I don't know if staff can answer this, but the language of it says it should be done within 60 days. Is that saying that it's okay that it goes over 60?
If it's over 60 days, it would have to be redone. A new
Well, but if the language is changed from shall to should, it would seem to give the city flexibility
Yes,
to go
yes,
beyond 60.
yes,
But
I agree, yes.
is that the intent?
Yes, it gives somebody the flexibility. That's where the line of authority, to me,
Right.
need to be drawn. So is this, somebody else should be doing it? Is this a new action? What are we saying?
Well, I mean, in some sense, in some regards, this is distinct from who actually has the authority.
Yeah,
We're talking about
right.
the timing of it. So I don't know, Susan, if you could speak to this, if you know what the intent was to change it from shall to should for whoever's got the authority.
Right.
I mean, that's something that perhaps should
I'll
be
mark
mentioned to Rick, and just to clarify what the intent is here. Admittedly, that's a small issue. It doesn't speak to the larger
Yeah.
ones regarding controlled communication. But I think we can continue to talk about this, but ultimately, I do think tonight it's appropriate for us to make a motion, to have a recommendation on this item so that council can act on it. I think that's fair, in my opinion, since we've had this for more than a month now.
Mr. Chair. I
We want everybody
disagree.
to have-
We haven't had this document.
Say that
for more
again?
than- I would disagree. We haven't had this document for more than a month. We've had this document for 4 days.
This document meaning the proposal?
The exact proposed.
I thought that to my reading, it's the same as what we had last month. I could be wrong about that. I don't know if it's,
I don't believe we had it last month.
well, we have an amend, last month's packet has a proposed amendment in it. And I compared them. I didn't go line by line, but they look very, very similar to me. I didn't see any differences. So again, I'm speaking for myself. I think it's appropriate for us to act. Why delay? Which is to say, if we think this is a bad idea, it's not gonna get better in a month, right? Let's tell them it's a bad idea. Or if you like parts of it, let's move on with it. I don't think it does us or the city or the council any favors to delay it. That's my opinion. So I'd like to encourage or urge us to make a motion. We can talk about the motion, but ultimately, let's try to get something out of here.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
are you looking for a motion for recommendation?
say that again?
Are you looking for a motion
am.
on recommendation?
Sure. And I will just reiterate what I said before for consideration if people would like to pursue that. We have 3 different elements of the code before us, 34, chapter 34, which deals with lighting, 66 signs, and 98 zoning. My view is that 98 zoning, which is where the the conceptual design planning is located, is the area that makes the most sense for council to have ultimate and clear explicit authority. Whereas I think the city is best served by the commission retaining authority for lighting and signs. But that's just a suggestion, and I'm open to anything others would care to make.
And you don't think we need more time to review this?
Well, you could,
I'm thinking that we need to have more time and maybe have the full commission here to make that recommendation. I realize it's not required, but I'm just thinking that maybe it has a little more impact. So I would like to recommend that we extend this for 1 month to our next meeting to come up with a final recommendation. Can you accept that, or is that,
Well, does that have to be in a motion form?
I can do that in a motion.
Well, does- Anybody know? If we wanted to extend it, do we need a motion to extend it?
Basically, be a motion to postpone.
Yeah. So why don't you make a motion to postpone? Let's see what happens.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we extend this action for 30 days to our next meeting to give us more time to digest what we're proposing. And at our next meeting, we'll have it on our agenda that there will be a firm recommendation from P and Z to the council on the action we should take on this proposed ordinance.
I'll
Is there a second? Discussion of the motion?
I just,
You should have said
I've said it all.
Jeff, do you want to add anything?
No, I did, just like I said, I feel that we're getting ramrodded on this, and, you know, we are missing a few, although I do appreciate Mike emailing his in, and I don't know, I would like for this to, his suggestions or feelings or thoughts be made part of the record.
Okay.
So I would just, Mario hasn't thought any of this. I know Jason was here last month. I agree. I would prefer that extra time.
Okay. Ron, do you want, Richard, either one of you care to add anything?
Well, I was just gonna go through them line by line and just see if we can change a few, change a couple of these items, just to review them, give suggestions for change.
Well, we've got this motion up.
Well,
right
no,
now,
I'm
so,
just saying,
yeah.
something we can do in the
In the interim.
interim, yes.
Richard, any comment?
I agree with Ron.
You want to add to the motion to include an interim review?
You could.
I'm sorry, to add to the motion.
To include an interim review during this 30-day period?
Well, I mean, I think that's what we.
Yeah, I take that to be
That's
automatic.
assumed.
Yeah, it's assumed.
So I would just reiterate my position that I think, again, I think we can act on this.
Yeah.
I don't know that the extra time is necessary, and I certainly, I want to be responsive to council. I don't,
I agree with you, but I believe this body is a little more comfortable if they could have a little more time for
so the
review.
motion is to, did you get it down? I don't
Yeah,
know if you got
yeah,
it.
we're gonna,
Do you want to read it back?
to
Postpone.
postpone until next meeting for review. Want to add something to that?
Nope. So that is the motion. All in favor of the motion, please signal aye.
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 Opposed? One opposed.
What's that? You're opposed?
And by tradition, I don't vote. It's up to break ties, so that's what the motion is. And we'll let Alex communicate this to council. But we are due to be back here on the, I believe it is the 5th of August. You could check me on that. No.
The
7th.
7th, the 7th of August.
7th of August, so that's 4 weeks. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our agenda for this evening, I think, right? Yes, brings us to the end.
Yeah, it's
Is there a motion, Ron?
Mr. Chairman, a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of adjourning, signal aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Stand adjourned, it's 8:02.